And we're recording. So hi, I'm Amanda Lannert. I'm the CEO of Jellyvision, and I have an amazing panel of experts, leaders of industry, titans, if you will, who are here to share perspectives on how we're going to get back to work in the office or from home or some combination, and how work is going to change in the world post-COVID. What I'd love to do is have each of the esteemed panelists introduce themselves, talk about your experience with remote work, and then let us know what changes made for COVID do you plan on keeping once we return to something more like work as normal, whatever that new normal will look like. Let's start with Ross.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ross Kimbarovsky. I'm the founder and CEO of crowdSPRING. crowdSPRING is a global marketplace where a community of over 220,000 freelancers help small businesses, agencies, and nonprofits with everything from logo design to web design to product design and naming. I've been working remote for the last 4 years full time. Before that, for the last 12 years, we've had a distributed team, people on 7 continents. And before that, I was an attorney, and I also did quite a bit of remote work then. I was a trial attorney, so it's a little hard to work remote, but when I didn't have to be in court, particularly on the weekends, I preferred to do that. For us, we're very fortunate that we have been remote and distributed. We have a community of 350,000 people who are located in over 195 countries. And so we don't have to make changes, and we're lucky in that we've set up processes and have struggled through a few years of trying to understand, particularly early on when we had mixed teams, some in the office and some remote. And I struggled through that issue with multiple different companies until we finally found a very good balance that worked for us well and implemented that in multiple companies. And we can talk about that. So we don't plan to make any changes in the post-COVID-19 world because we were fortunate to be in a position where we were already doing the things that most businesses are struggling to figure out today.
And we will hit that. What are those things that you're doing well? Is it documentation? Is it tooling? Is it systems and process? We will for sure get to that, but let's go to Tom.
My name is Tom Vranas. I'm the Vice President of Innovation and Culture for Everywhere Wireless. We're an internet service provider here in Chicago, changing the way that consumers perceive internet services. We have never had a work from home policy in place. We're very much tied to Chicago and the Chicagoland area. So this has been a massive transformation for us. The team has been incredible. We just finished a large renovation of our beautiful office spaces in the West Loop. And so everyone's clamoring to get back. So one of the things that is on our mind is how do we get people back to the office, because everyone wants to be together and be in community, but how do we do so in a safe way? A lot of our employees are counting on public transportation. We've got all of these great break rooms and all of these great areas where we wanted to foster community in our new space. And we're struggling to figure out how do we get people back, but how do we make sure that they're safe as well?
Awesome, thank you. Kate? You gotta unmute.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Kate. I'm CEO of Ruby. We are a virtual reception and live chat answering services for small businesses. And we have offices in Portland, Kansas City, and Scottsdale. And prior to COVID, we had no work from home policy. And similar to Tom, we have all of our employees very anxious to get back into the office, not only from just a community and a culture perspective, because we do have a very young workforce, but also because what we do is actually largely a call center business. So when you think about the environment and the best environment for call centers, there are a lot of things that can happen in a home that provide additional issues and risks and things we need to manage as part of our business. That said, since we've been working from home, we've learned a lot, and we do believe that there is a portion of our business that can continue working from home. For instance, we're 24/7 services, and having 10 people in an office overnight doesn't necessarily give you the culture and the things that you need. So we also have a very young population, a lot of single moms, where perhaps there is a better environment, a more flexible environment where we can provide better opportunities for those folks as well.
Kate in a prior life was also an investment banker who lived on a plane. And I just have to ask, like, to
Yes.
get to the chase, are we ever going to be on planes again?
You know, not anywhere near as much, because I will tell you, interestingly enough, while my offices are in Portland, Kansas City, and Scottsdale, I live in California. I don't live where any of our offices are. And I have been commuting back and forth for about a year. And now, quite honestly, the way we are communicating very effectively via tools, I'm asking myself, do I want to get back on a plane right now? And the answer is a pretty clear no. And I'm not necessarily sure there is the benefit of that physical presence when we're all really using these tools pretty effectively to communicate. So I think we're going to see a very significant reduction in travel overall.
Yeah, I found because of spending the last 3 months largely in my basement, a lot of the truths I've told myself about how work gets done are not holding up. I am very much I get on a plane, get in a room, and sometimes just two people on Zoom having a face-to-face virtual chat can be just as effective,
Yep.
and it saves you the 9 hours of travel. So a lot of these lessons are being rethought. Last but not least, Steve.
Hi, Stephen Perry. I'm a vice president with Arcadis. It's a global design engineering firm. We have 28,000 employees around the planet, about 5,000 here in North America. And I lead a group that focuses on technical communications to address all our various client needs to interact and communicate with people. So it's a good topic for me to explore with you all today. I think we're all getting used to dogs barking and kids making noise and doors slamming and things going on around us, bad internet connections. But I've been working from home primarily between an airplane and home for the last 10 years or so. And so very familiar with this, because one of the things we just did the last few years is break down all the cubicles and take away the office doors and convert to an activity-based workspace. So that was a cultural shift in itself. And now with COVID and really kind of forcing everybody to work remotely, we're already seeing another wave, and difficult to predict where that workplace culture will end up. But we already do it very well. We don't focus on geography. We focus on our work and our projects and bringing the best experts to the job. So it's kind of forced us to, well, not forced, we've gone willingly to figure out a better way and how to be efficient.
Hey, Steve, can I dive in on that? Activities-based work, I get it when it's a manufacturing line.
Yeah.
What does it mean when it's sort of, thought labor? How do you do activities-based work as strategic white-collar workers? Can you tell just 2 sentences more about what that means? Because I bet there are lessons that can be learned from a remote first environment.
Yeah, and it's partly what I said. We're moving away from cubicle land and having really much more physical interaction and proximity to one another. So a lot easier to just quickly grab a colleague or a group of people and get together and work a problem. So that's largely the premise of it. And so physically, really just tables and chairs in different nooks and crannies around the space. And for some, we've looked at the generational impacts or considerations of that. And some, like anything else with humanity, some really take to it very excited and feel empowered and open to collaborate more. Others really miss their door and miss the cubicle and a little more privacy and so forth. So it's been an interesting thing to observe.
So Tom and Kate have team members that want to get back to the office. As I've been reading about how to prepare offices, I've read that high rises may have up to a 300-minute wait for elevators if the social distancing practices are held. So the reality is I don't think most companies will have everyone go back en masse at the same time until all restrictions are lifted, which could be 18 months away. So we've seen work when everyone's at work. We've seen work when everyone is in their basements or in their homes working. What are some of the things we're going to have to navigate and anticipate as quarantine restrictions are lifted and some employees go back to work and some don't? How will tools fail us? How will processes need to change? What do we need to think through when it's a blended model, which it seems like it's going to need to be for the next 6 months or so? Tom and Kate would love to hear you weigh in on that.
Sure, I'll hop in first. So one of the things that we're fortunate about is that our space is our space, and it's a low rise, and we don't have to deal with elevators, escalators, and all of those other things that happen a couple blocks away from us downtown. Again, what we've done is started to sketch out, because it's all the rage, a phased policy of here's what the different phases look like, and not really attaching timeframes to them yet, but really start to think through what does phase one look like, right? And the ability to say, it's split scheduling, it's some people still working from home completely, but really like how's the best way to slowly get back without making promises on dates. I think that's one of the things that, as we've seen, people get really antsy when there's a date that's set specifically, and then that date continues to move, right? We've seen a lot of that goalpost moving, and I think that's what has contributed to a lot of anxiety across the board the past couple of months, is that there's a phase, but it seems like the rules continue to change. So what we've done is start to think about holistically, and then also very specifically within those phases, what do we need to do as a company? How do individuals need to work? And then how do we start to make those steps to get there? So we're not reacting, we're being more proactive. But it's gonna be difficult, and I don't think anyone has the answer quite yet. And all the conversations I've had with other leaders, I think everyone is still in that let's wait and see, but let's start to actually think about it and plan for it.
Yeah, I'm curious, like, to get really tactical for a second. Zoom, I think we've always had Zoom rooms where we could patch in the one or two people who are permanently remote, and what they would see is the back of everybody's heads having an around the table conversation. And one of the things I'm thinking is, like, do we go back to work and ask everybody, no matter where they are, to turn on their own camera and have a face-to-face with their laptop to make it more effective for remote people? Because when everyone's remote, Zoom is amazing. When 50% of people are sitting around a room and looking at each other and feeling that energy, and then 50% are patched in on a screen on a wall, there is a separation. There is an inequality of access and energy and things like that. Like, how are we going to navigate that? Kate, as you think about getting people back to work and you want to have that office environment, but in the interim, what are going to be some rules and techniques about creating inclusive energy no matter what people are?
That's a particularly hard question for Ruby, because 500 of our 600 employees have desktop computers with 2 screens and no camera. And the thought of moving them back and forth, you're going at home for 30 days, you're going back in the office, they're moving a substantial amount of equipment. And each time they move out of the office to in the office, their computers need to be reconfigured for accessibility direct to the network or to the VPN. So all of a sudden, we start to create these extraordinarily complex maintenance environments for our IT staff, because now they're maintaining non-homogeneous environments, which is extraordinarily difficult. There are, of course, difficulties at home as well. Do you have Alexa on in the background? And again, there's privacy issues with things like this. And so the considerations of dual factor authentication, which is something we immediately deployed and say, gosh, this computer with information about clients is sitting on it, we've got to get that locked down and in lockdown right away. So there's a lot of things that we deployed from a security and privacy perspective. Now, the reality for our business is, as we think about going back into the office, we are in high rises, we are in dense facilities, we're in call center environments where our activities all day long are talking, and we're in spaces that aren't well ventilated. And so unfortunately, I have to look at my workforce and say, we have the potential of being a super spreader. If I put even 25% of the population back in an office right now, And not only is that dangerous for our employees, it's actually dangerous for the community when they leave the office and actually head back home. So unfortunately, we've chosen to be extraordinarily conservative about when we go back into the office, and we will likely be not considering shorter term policies of shift rotation because logistics are extraordinarily difficult. But then you also get into scenarios when you've got most of the workforce that wants to be back in. How do you fairly pick who goes back in first without feeling that it is either tenure-based or potentially discriminatory and all the legal issues that come along with it? So it is an extraordinarily complex question. And our goal certainly is not to avoid that question. The reality is for us, we don't believe our employees can operate safely in an office environment until there is much more significant progress that's made in terms of cleaning, vaccinations, testing, et cetera.
So thinking about Kate's workforce, people who like to talk to strangers for a living, or at least can do it without dying slowly. One of the things I'd like to hear from Stephen and Ross is working from home just for introverts? How do extroverts do it and not burn out and die? I mean, all the documentation, the lack of like spontaneous physical bumping into water cooler talk. Is working from home or remote work for everyone?
So I'm happy to start the answer here. It's certainly not for everyone. There are people, whether you're an extrovert or doing a job that simply cannot be done effectively at home. So you're involved in technology and IT, and you're protecting server infrastructure, and you've by design closed off access to your servers from the outside. So you need to be inside to minimize that risk. Or you may be in a call center, although there are solutions for that too. We've had a support team for the last 12 years, all of whom have been remote all over the world. I've had people travel for a year doing support while traveling around the world on different continents, different time zones. So it's not for everyone. I think the problem isn't so much who it's for. The problem is that our approach to remote work is fundamentally flawed. And so the approach today is a managerial approach. And of course, you know, the prototypical manager versus leader scenario. Manager is making sure everything is done right, where a leader figures out how to do the right things. And so our approach today simply is trying to mimic what we did at the office and asking a fundamental question. Can this person or this group at home do the same thing they did at the office? And that's the wrong question to ask, because we're not moving work home. We're trying to figure out how to do work better. And if we are only answering the question of how to move work, it's going to limit most companies fundamentally. So there are cultures that require people to be together. There are cultures that require people to be apart. But the notion of trying to figure out how to mimic with tools or with processes what we did at the office doesn't help us advance, because most companies fundamentally didn't do a good job at the office. Most companies are fundamentally not productive. Collaboration is largely a misnomer. You can put people around a table at the office, but everything I've read about collaboration says that's not the best way to start collaboration. So when we rolled out remote work, distributed workforce at crowdSPRING 12 years ago, the first thing I did to solve for the problem, Amanda, you asked about earlier, which is how will people react to talking with a group in the office, is I stayed home for a week and had my team at the office, and I talked to them. And when I came back, I said, this is fundamentally idiotic because I can't hear a single thing anybody says. So we picked lots of microphones. We picked the best microphones, and I did the same thing. And I came back and I said, this can't work. Half the time I can't hear, half the time you can't hear. We're remote. We're in the office, everybody's at their desks, look at a camera, whether you're standing next to your colleague or your countries away. Because fundamentally, you have to figure out a way to move forward that's both democratic to everybody, but also raises the level of work, which remote can do. All the studies show that it can do if you approach it to try to figure out what you need to do, the right things to do, not doing the things right that you used to do at the office.
Ross, let me add to that a couple of things. Just excellent points. One thing about remote work and what we're doing right here is it does have the potential to level the playing field. So we have enough injustice in our world already. We have enough challenges with hierarchies and org charts and things like that in the workplace. And, you know, from an equity lens, we look at remote work, and you just described one example where, regardless of where we are, how are we going to get work done and do it effectively together? And so giving everyone a camera, kind of the same equipment, if you will, the same access to the room, it's a great equalizer. You know, there is no, our little screens, our little windows on the screen here are not stacked by org chart. They aren't organized in some preconceived cultural way. So that's kind of cool. We could work with that. And secondly, to your earlier question, Amanda, about, you know, not being around the water cooler, how do we still connect with our folks? What I would offer is, as a leader, we still have our intuition. We still have the ability to read between the lines, whether that's a, you know, emotionless email or a phone call or a video chat. So that's what I go with, is my intuition and my gut. It's like, okay, if I'm sensing as a human to human something going on or something not being said, no matter the channel of that communication, I'm going to reach out to that individual and just check in and do a one-on-one or something like that. So we can't, you know, throw out the best of us and our hopes, and as individuals, as leaders, and as a culture and a population, as humans, we can't throw out the good stuff. We have to find a way to blend it in. And, you know, it's a dog and tail kind of thing. Technology is our friend and a benefit here, but we have to be people first and make that work. So, Ross, back to your point, let's get work done. It's not necessarily about where we're doing that from. It's how we're doing it, how we're interacting with each other.
Well, let's talk how. Kate, you used to be able to walk into a very large room and call attention and get everyone in the company, all eyes on you in 3 minutes. Not that you would, but you could theoretically. How does company communication, the cadence, the format, the modalities change when everyone's not in the same room, but are in fact all in different rooms? Can you talk a little bit about how you've had to adjust, you know, your leadership style, your communication? Is it more written documentation? Is it you're emailing people? Is it you ask people to go into Zoom rooms? Just talk about the difference of, like, we're all eyes on each other to completely not.
It's actually a great question, because I found, if anything, the channel and the form of communication has proliferated. It has just gotten broader and broader because it really depends on what the message is. One, we have found a need because right now our employee base, they're scared. They don't know, is my job safe? Am I going to have the same income that I have today? When am I going to get sick? Am I going to be discriminated upon in the environment that they're in? And what they're really looking for is information. So we have actually chosen to provide way more information at a way more frequent pace than we ever have before, because the best thing that I can do is help solve that piece of doubt and help take away a little bit of that fear. And sometimes these conversations that we need to have are complicated and they're very complex. And it's everything from, what is going on with COVID-19 and how do we think about that as a business, and what does it mean for us in the activities that we do? And for things like that, I will actually put together a narrated presentation where it is me videoing it and it's going through data. And because what we've tried to explain to every employee right now, data is our best friend, because we really don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We're just in an unusual environment that the best laid plans are going to change daily, weekly, monthly, and we don't know how long we're going to be in this environment 18 months from now. So as we make decisions, and some of those decisions might be unpopular, and many of them that we're making today are unpopular, about wage increases and bonuses and things of that nature, what we have committed to do is communicating those early and communicating the why behind the change. And again, I spend more time now than I have ever before on video, on narrating with real data, on taking the time to even educate every single employee about what is MRR and why does it matter and why is it important to our business, because everyone should understand why we're looking at that and why we're making decisions around it. So we do newsletters every week that go out to employees. We actually have, because everyone is remote, we publish those not only on our internal, we use Microsoft Teams as a communication platform. We have an all Teams channel that goes there. It also goes out via email. We actually see that the consumption of communication is very different. People prefer email over Teams and Teams over email. And so we typically will try to communicate over multiple different channels. We've had to actually also get ourselves organized around the communications that just happen amongst our communities. So we've been big adopters of Yammer. So in internal communication and collaboration where we can sign up for the things that we're interested in, because sometimes we get to the point where what used to be the community at email, was just, oh my gosh, there's too much. I need to turn it off right now too, because I'm having a hard time getting through the information that's relevant or that's truly that I'm interested in. So we have we've made a number of changes. Cadence, channel, and the content, quite honestly, has probably been the biggest fundamental change, and ensuring that everyone gets access to it as well.
So I think an important part of communication is listening. And I'd sort of open this up to everybody about how are you listening, both at scale? How are you getting sort of the sentiment and saying, what are your questions and how do I hear from you? One of the things I miss most is the random water cooler talk where I would cross paths with somebody, organically getting coffee, and end up having, a 5 or 10 minute conversation where I learned something about the business. And I think as a CEO, it's very different when two people just happen to be getting coffee at the same time versus me popping a meeting on your calendar where you're like, am I getting fired? This is not a low stress situation. Like, how do you organically listen, not at scale? How do you get feedback not at scale? If I could, anyone with remote experience to talk about, like, how are you not just communicating, but like listening at scale and then organically and as well.
I'm happy to at least start the conversation. So I've done two things from the very beginning of starting to hire people. The first thing I do is before I hire anybody, I do the job myself. Because I need to understand the pain points and how they do it so that I can understand when they tell me there's friction later, what they're saying. People are not necessarily great at communicating everything they feel. And sometimes as leaders, we need to sauce that out of them. And more importantly, having been a trial attorney for 13 years, talking to juries, I appreciate the significant barrier in talking by video. Body language is nearly absent. You can't look somebody in the eye. And so I do the job myself. And then periodically, I continue to do it. So I spent a week on customer support every few months. I work closely with the engineering team. And in doing that, in talking through some of the friction points, I can better understand what their feedback is. And of course, lots of one-on-ones. We do something as a group that's nice, and I encourage people to do it. So for the past 5 years, every month we have something we call Anything Goes. Every week we do a roadmap with our group where everybody contributes ideas to our product, and we meet for an hour and we talk through those ideas, debate them, decide what to do. But once a month, we do something called Anything Goes. We can talk about anything except anything related to work. And that's a water cooler conversation by all of our folks. We sometimes talk about viruses, sometimes we talk about flying objects, sometimes we talk about racial discrimination, books, but it's a topic driven by the team. And those conversations continue later on. And the reason we do that, number one, because we try to replace the water cooler conversations that occur. But I also want to encourage people to understand that they can take the time during their workday to have those kinds of conversations. It's not critical that they are working every second of every hour of every day, or that they're working 9 to 5. We've always had a very flexible schedule. We've let people work from the top of mountains if they have an internet connection and they need it. But encouraging people to practice those things. So I'm a firm believer that you can't legislate culture. You can create it. So if anybody suggests they want to do something, my immediate answer is generally is, sure, give it a try. If you want to assemble a group to do something, do it. If it takes that means your culture is integrated with that idea. Most of the time it doesn't, which means you're trying to create something that simply can't be supported. And so I think there are lots of different good ways to do it, and there are also obviously lots of bad ways to do it. But one of the best ways is to empathize with your employees rather than sympathize with them. And that's the mistake that almost every manager makes. Leaders make this mistake commonly too, but most managers sympathize. They say, I'm sorry that customer service is so tough for you and you have angry customers. They can't empathize because they haven't walked in the shoes of the people they're supervising.
Let's talk more about that. How does the role of managers evolve with remote work? Tom, you want to take a shot at that?
Sure. Yeah, I think in this current pandemic, I think it's probably toughest on our managers because they've got they have dual roles, right? They've got to move the vision of the company forward, but they also have a group of individuals that are, in some place scared, in some place worried, in some places, working from a totally new way. And so what we've tried to do is give managers some training and some focus to not just push the work, but also to increase their emotional intelligence, to give some space for them to be able to have conversations about how their team is doing, and then start to use things that we've never used before, which is, how are you feeling? And those soft conversations that are now baked into the way that we do work. We actually got lucky. We implemented a tool about 3 weeks before we had to go work from home, and it was a change in the way that we measure our employee satisfaction. We moved from employee satisfaction to a simple daily email that says, how was your day? Right? Not how was your work day? What struggles did you face in your work? But really, how was your day? And it's an email. They click on 1 of 5 responses. It's anonymous. They're able to communicate across the platform. And it's really been a great way for us to get into that feel of, I'm frustrated because of X, or I'm feeling lonely because I'm not around my team, or I'm terrified because I don't know when I'm going to go back to work. And having that type of platform, which is a super quick check-in, it changes the conversation from how productive were you, or did you hit your metrics, or why are we low on this scorecard, or what, all those things that aren't around the soft skills. We've been trying to push ourselves to make sure that people are feeling supported, and feeling like they have the space to talk about the emotional side of work.
I think I was talking with Stephen about this. I've never really noticed in business before when someone says, how are you doing, that people actually tell the truth. And they sit down and they like, here's where I am, and things like that. I'd love to hear. I love anything goes. I love that as an idea. It's unique. I haven't heard of it before. It's very helpful. What else are people doing to track and improve morale? And how are you celebrating? I'm going to sound like a lush in saying this, but I was big at Jellyvision about, let's go grab a drink. Let's go get coffee or tea or wine or whatever. Let's go grab a drink. Nobody's grabbing anything right now. So how are you tracking and managing morale? And then how do you celebrate? Anyone want to jump on that one?
So I'm happy to take that one. So we actually just recently deployed as a tool Culture Amp. So not only is it actually helping us get detailed level feedback from how our employees are feeling, but it also allows us to get that real-time pulse check. But probably more importantly, that's nice to have that forum, and it's nice to be able to get that feedback anonymously, because part of what happens is you just have to be able to create that safe environment to share the things that you're a little bit afraid to talk about right now, and to feel like you're giving criticism. So for instance, setting the tone that it is okay to say the things that you're concerned about, the things that you're mad about, to your manager, to me directly, without fear of ramification. But the other side of that is we can't ignore that all of the good work that's going on right now, just because we're in the middle of a period of total chaos. And so we do take the time, and we stop very regularly, and we encourage our community to lead these celebrations. So for instance, we have literally about 40 different teams that are employee initiated and self-created that celebrate the things that each other do. So they have baking contests and dance party Tuesdays and maintenance Monday, where literally employees have actually shown each other how to shave and give haircuts. And really just encouraging them to take art lessons with each other, learn how to play guitar. And so it not only gives them the opportunity to engage, but it gives them an opportunity to engage on common threads and things that they're interested in. And these are the channels that for me as a leader, I love to see, because when I give my weekly updates, I go look at the amazing activity and I specifically pull employees out and say, oh my gosh, this person did this amazing thing. And if you've seen this piece of art, look at how wonderful it is. Because now everyone sees that I'm paying attention to it, that I care about it. And I participate in Dance Tuesdays and don't hesitate to make a fool of myself. So part of it is leading by example. Part of it is the encouragement to let employees lead these things right now, because they really do need an opportunity to focus their energy on positive things as well.
Yeah, I might add to that, Kate, a couple of things. One is a leader, and I'd say also a manager, sometimes we just got to get out of the way. And wonderful, Ross, you kind of touched on this too, wonderful things can happen organically if we just kind of consciously get out of the way sometimes. And then also on the celebration, one thing that, I've had my moments of skepticism and trials and tribulations with moving to our current remote work status and everything done through a chat window like this. But Kate, what you were saying, it comes to me, we're all experimenting right now with different backgrounds. Like, how can I have the most interesting background? Or, Amanda, I mentioned this to the other day. Apparently there's a huge spike in sales of shirts and blouses, but not pants. Nobody's buying pants, just the shirts and blouses. But my point is that the background is almost like an extension into the rest of our life, rather than just as a worker or a colleague I know at work. This is essentially forcing us to get to know each other better. Oh, what are you doing in the rest of your life? Because we're out of that context of the workspace. So again, let's not throw all the old away, throw all this away when the pandemic releases or lifts. But let's figure out what are the best parts of this, and let's keep that. And one last thing on celebratory, I'm a big fan of the cheesy, get together and frankly force everybody to turn on this camera. And because I don't know any other way to say it, you can't hide. You can't multitask. You can't be distracted in doing something else when you're on video. You've got to be present in that moment and in the now. And that's a good thing.
I've noticed when I used to do all company addresses, where there'd be 300 people in a room, and I'd get kind of like the dead-eyed stare. People just sit there and stare. But on Zoom, there's social pack to show that you're paying attention. I get a lot more of this. So I love presenting to 300 squares on Zoom. I get a lot more positive feedback, just to overly share. But speaking about overly sharing, these are stressful times. And then there's a lot of extraordinary loneliness because people aren't allowed to leave their homes. How are you as leaders addressing mental health at work? Zoom burnout is benign, but like profound loneliness might be something less benign. How do you people who have been remote for forever, how do you prevent Zoom burnout? And then how are you as leaders talking about mental health, addressing mental health, and helping employees who may not be doing particularly well from a mental health perspective? Ross, you want to take the lead there?
Sure. So for us, it starts when we hire. I don't read resumes. I've never read them. I don't really care where somebody went to school or what they did. We ask questions. We ask 5 questions typically on a job application. And if somebody's a good writer and answers them well, we'll talk to them. And so what I'm looking to find out is somebody's level of experience, not so much working remotely, but being able to work independently, sometimes being able to work on a challenge where they at times need to collaborate and at times need to focus. Because fundamentally, if a person doesn't have either the intuition or the experience to do that, it's going to be really tough for them to fit into a culture that requires different things. And so one mistake we see companies make is they're trying to mold their existing workforces into a totally different workforce, doing something different, but the same way they used to do it before. And so we avoid that mistake, and we, for the most part, do a good job. I mean, we make mistakes like everybody else, but we avoid that mistake at the time that we hire people. We try to hire people that are pretty independent and self-sufficient. But it's an important issue. So for example, we recognized very early on in this pandemic, and I started looking at this pandemic back in February. I had 2 kids in school. I was concerned about them. I told them in February they're coming home on spring break and not going back to school, regardless of what the government was going to do. So we were prepared. But one thing I realized very quickly, having worked with many different people over the years, is some people love information. They want to know everything they can about the virus. They want to know everything they can about the metrics. And other people don't want to hear anything, particularly at work, where they're not there to study the virus. And so it became challenging for us. We use Slack as a communication tool, and I think tools like Slack can be very harmful to companies. They can be very helpful to companies depending on how you use them. And so we've worked out over the last 12 years very good processes for what we use Slack for and what we don't. But one thing that I suggested early on is, rather than force people into conversations on Slack, why don't I create a Basecamp? So we also use Basecamp, one of our, it's our main project management tool. And all of our collaboration and ideation and most of our conversations actually happen asynchronously in Basecamp for our team, and have been this way for the last 12 years. So I started a Basecamp called Pandemics. And in that Basecamp, we had a number of different threads. We started adding threads on good resources for parents. So these are free classes and schools that were offering the ability for kids to just audit classes that were being taught to their children. We started sharing good reading materials on metrics and research that's going done. That way, anybody who wants to can come in, read. I started sharing information on mental health. I read a lot about these issues. It's important for me, both my family, the people that we work with. And remember, we work with a community of 350,000 people around the world. So they are impacted as well. This is a global pandemic. And so we created this resource for people to, whenever they want to, if they want to, take a look, add to it, read, and comment. And of course, when we do our Anything Goes periodically, if that's a topic people want to talk about, that's fine. There's no restrictions, as long as it's not about work. And if it's a topic they don't want to talk about, that's fine too. The other thing we did is one of my people suggested we have just a weekly session where we can talk about mental health. And I said, that's a wonderful idea. Do it without me, because oftentimes leaders change conversations in remarkably radical ways, sometimes for the better, most of the time for the worse. And so I said, do it. If people need to get together, if they need to do it every day, do it every day for 10 minutes. And I strongly encourage the entire team to do these one-on-ones with each other whenever they felt like talking to somebody about anything. Work, not work, kids, books, it didn't really matter. Because it's so important that people are productive. Fundamentally, nobody works 8 hours a day. People can be physically in a seat for 8 hours a day, but the amount of work that gets done is maybe 2-3 hours, and on a great day, maybe 4 hours, whether they're at work or at home. So we have to recognize that. The key for us as leaders, and the key for managers, is to maximize those 4 hours into the best 4 hours possible. And so if you can give people the opportunity to get some relief, if you tell people, I know that every second of a waking day can't be ultimate focus for you. I know that you can't be on the phone for 8 hours without suffering some kind of impact, talking to angry customers or talking to engineers that are frustrated. So encouraging teams to find those reliefs, having those honest conversations when people bring them up, but fundamentally, going back to where I started, hiring people so that you can bring people in who are open and honest and candid, so that they're not hiding behind their feelings and then it blows up on you. They're comfortable telling you whenever they feel mental fatigue to say, listen, I'm not feeling great this week about what I'm doing. I need a mental break. And then giving people that mental break.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask Tom to also weigh in, because the big difference is, Russ, you hire for people who are good doing remote work. Tom hires for people who want a bustling, Chicago office with lots of noise. And Tom, how are you taking care of your team, and how are you talking about mental health as a leader when the deal has shifted 180 for your people?
Yeah, we've tried a number of tactics. So we've brought in a whole bunch of experts to help lead sessions, to make sure that people are taking care of themselves and giving them the tools that I think a lot of our team, especially the younger team, they haven't had to go through these types of things, so they don't have the skill set of dealing with some of these larger, more difficult issues. So we've tried to do almost a weekly expert session where it's been about mindfulness, about stress reduction, about tying the physical in with the emotional. So we've done that. We've also done a whole bunch of one-off sessions, and we started to do these more regularly now, where it's almost a virtual happy hour, where we just bring people together. We've had leadership sit out of some of those, so that it's not one of those things where you're feeling like you're forced to show up because you know that your manager is there. The other thing is that we've communicated with more transparency and more honesty than I think we're used to, or maybe even comfortable with, and saying, hey, we're all kind of feeling the same way. And guess what? We all don't have the answer. And I think being open and honest, and not saying, like, not being the rah-rah. I'm a big rah-rah guy. And there are times where I've got to tell my team and the rest of the team, hey, I'm not feeling rah-rah today. Like, I'm feeling down, and I'm there with you. And so I think that open, honest communication. And then also for us, we use Teams as well. What I've seen is just popping in for a quick chat, and just saying, hey, how are you feeling, right? Or I know this is going on, or I could sense by the tone in an email that I got yesterday that something that you're feeling something that we should maybe unpack a little bit, right? And it doesn't have to be an hour-long phone call. I'm not a trained psychologist, but having myself and the other team members pick up on those nonverbal cues, and then unpack them and say, what's going on and how can I support you? So it's a number of those things that we're throwing everything against the wall. Some of it's sticking better than others, but I think another part is really having the team seeing that we're going through this, we're trying to figure this out, and that we're open to feedback, suggestions, and really try to help them however we can.
I really hope that we don't go back to not caring about people and not being transparent and always, having I hope that these are lessons learned, that like a little humility and vulnerability and humanity at work is actually good for business. I hope something good comes out of this. Two final questions to these amazing panelists. What do we need to unlearn about work? What mindsets and acquired behaviors are going to limit future success given these shifts in behaviors? Whether it's about managers or celebration or one-on-ones, I'd love to hear from everybody. What's one thing we've got to unlearn about work as we come out of this at-home shutdown and try to reestablish new norms?
I'll jump in there first because it has to do with what I just said. I think that really understanding that work is more than just a place you go for a couple hours a day or 8 hours a day, that we've seen that work is truly a community, right? And work is a place where you get to be creative, you get to bring your best, you get to bring your frustrations, you get to build, you get to create. It's more than work, it's a community, it's a support system. And I think what we've seen over the past couple months is everyone rallying together to build that community and to support each other and to lift people up when they're not feeling their best, and to celebrate the successes. So I think it's not necessarily a huge shift for us, but I think across the board, as I talk again to other leaders, that we're reframing what exactly work is. It's not just a 40-hour cash a paycheck thing. It is a vital part of being tied to a community.
Awesome. Anyone else? What do you got to what do we have to unlearn about work moving forward?
I totally agree with Tom. The other thing I would add is we all need to realize that work also includes leading around work-life balance. We have a tendency as managers and leaders to only focus on the work piece. And I'll tell you right now, we're struggling by saying, please take time off. Please take that mental health day. Please make sure you are taking care of yourself. You're finding that time to have a break. And I think we all need to take more time and spend more time leading by saying, how can we help you find that balance? Is it physical location? Is it working from home? Is it the shift so you can actually do all of the things that you need to do? Is it a 4-day work week versus a 5-day work week? How can we all lead by helping give people way more balance?
So I think we should unlearn most things that we know about work to be productive. But if I had to pick one, it would be communication. How we communicate, why we communicate, when we communicate, where we communicate. So I mentioned how we use Slack, and we really try to use Slack for two things. Number one, anytime somebody starts their day, they say hello at our general channel. And when they leave, they say, I'm about to go. Does anybody need help before I leave? That's just part of our culture. And we think it's important because it's the equivalent of walking into an office so that people know. And I don't care if in that time people are working on top of the mountain. I don't care if they're working for 2 hours in the morning, then taking 10 hours off and then working in the middle of the night. But if you're working, we want people to be able to connect with each other. We use Basecamp for all asynchronous communications. If somebody sends me an email, they know my response is going to be put it in Basecamp because it's very difficult to find communications in email. And people, I think, use email quite a bit. So we try to asynchronously communicate so we can give feedback. We also talk about respecting people's priorities. So we make sure that people set schedules when they don't want to get notifications. And tools like Slack give you the ability to interrupt that schedule in an emergency. The first thing I ask people is for their phone numbers in case we do have an emergency. It's rare, but it happens. I want to be able to contact them. We never abuse that. So fundamentally, I think the biggest thing companies can do is change all of aspects of communication, because forcing people to communicate like they did before. So trying to find the equivalent of the water cooler conversation is a good goal, but it may not work nearly as well. Something better could be what we've done in the past. So we have a small team. We have 9 people, and I've had support teams where it's just women. So once a quarter, I would say to them, the 3 of you have a spa day. I'll pay for it. Go to a couple of restaurants, pamper yourself in a spa. I'll do customer support.
Sounds good to me.
That's far, far better than most of the other things that I could have done for them. And it recognizes that achievement. So I think fundamentally, let's not bring our communication practices from the office into the remote world. We tried to do that in the beginning. It just didn't work for us. And so we found a balance where we found better ways to communicate so that we can do more with less. I mean, we can do more work in less time. That's great. I want people to work 6 hours and do 8 hours of work, not work 10 hours and do 4 hours of work. And we should all want that, because fundamentally, at the end of the day, it's the amount of work that gets done that's important, not the amount of time somebody sits in a chair.
You all are amazing. Final.
I just add to that really, really quickly, what we have to unlearn, Ross, is the 9 to 5. And it might not work for all industries, all businesses, but that structured 9 to 5, those days are numbered. We don't know if kids are going back to school in the fall. I just think the flexibility of remote work and the expectation of the job is going to work at a set time and coming home at a set time, we've got to question that assumption going forward.
I've heard many wise things. And unfortunately, the thing I'm going to remember most is that Ross told me I need more spa time. But on a final note, if anyone had to write the book on the future of work post-pandemic, what would the title be? Do I have a volunteer about what the title would be about the book on the future of work post-pandemic? Ross.
Well, consistent with my theme, it'd be simple: reimagine.
There you go. Thank you, everybody, so much for your time. It has been great to hear from you. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Amanda, and thanks everybody else.
Amanda.
Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.